Good morning. It's Tuesday, and I'm Alex.
I'm Mushi.
And we're really excited to see you today. Today we're going to do our performance chair conversations, which is a communication project that we do that's nonverbal. And it's a way in which the person who's sitting in the chair becomes the listener, and the person who is standing becomes the speaker. But this is all in silence, and this is about moving the body as a form of communication, like an alphabet. Yeah, so we look forward to, we will each do about 10 minutes. It'll be about a 20-minute performance, and then after that, Rima will be speaking with us to ask us questions around collaboration and about the performance itself and what it means to communicate in this form. There anything else?
No, I think yeah, we'll just start.
Okay.
Yeah. So this will be like this is a durational performance that we started in 2015. Like Alex said, we go back and forth where each person takes a turn. It's almost like speaking and hearing via the body. Along the side, we also keep a journal after each practice or performance when we do this, to write down what we think we said via our body and what we think we heard via the other person. And this we've been writing for 5 years and haven't shown each other yet, because we want to see how this language evolves over time. So this is like a small showcase of this practice via Villa SF. So we just want to say thank you for giving us a platform to share this work. And we'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
You want to be seated first, or
I'll sit first.
you want to be seated?
Do you want to sit first?
Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Okay, you can move into the chair.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. How are you guys feeling?
Good.
Yeah.
It's always a little bit intense, like when you come out of it at first.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take a moment to maybe introduce myself, but well, as you guys kind of decompress from the performance. Hi, everyone. I'm Rima. I am very much a fan of Alex and Mushi's work and very honored to be here to moderate the Q&A and also ask them a few questions as they're decompressing from their performance and are part of this mini residency at, do I say Villa SF or do I say like the French consulate or the Confluence or both? I'm not quite sure, but I think you guys, Villa SF, right? Yeah. So maybe I'll just jump right in and kind of ask you guys how are things going as part of your residency as a first very easy question.
It's good to be here. We have just settled in. I guess this is our 4th day, and it's very peaceful. The space is really quiet. It's up amongst trees, so there's that feeling of a little bit of trees and nature, which you were talking about earlier, and you can take walks very easily from here into the forest. And that's sort of unexpected in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think just doing the residency, sort of being involved and being able to share our work and talking to you as well, like brings some sense of normalcy back, which is something I think all of us are lacking. So it's good to be sort of present in this like art space for a moment while, like the major container is everything we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like just sort of makes me stronger, makes us stronger to be able to maintain some type of normalcy. So
yeah.
Well, to engage in a type of dialogue is so exciting during this time.
Yeah. Well, also, and I was just going to say,
a lot.
Mm-hmm. Your work is so much about dialogue with one another, but it's also dialogue with the people that are in, like, not in the audience per se, but are kind of looking at your work, right, and looking at the performance and engaging with the performance. Do you want to talk a little bit about just that right now in the time of what we're experiencing, and maybe talk a little bit about your practice and how it came to be?
Well, obviously during this time, it's a lot more difficult to engage with the public. So one of the things that we do love is that engagement with the public.
Mm-hmm.
But we're obviously just looking at the different ways in which we can communicate. And if 90% of communication is nonverbal, what do those forms of communication look like? And we're sort of the testing ground. We start with ourselves as the testing ground. So obviously, like what you just witnessed, that's us trying to learn the alphabet of moving each other's bodies. And also when you're sitting, you have to relax your body entirely, and you're really subject to the other person's thoughts and feelings. And so it's really about listening. And I think one of the things I really enjoy a lot more during this time with this practice is anything that allows me to be really focused in a singular idea or thought or space, allows the fires, COVID, everything to sort of fall away, and it feels almost meditative.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it always felt that way, but it feels even more strongly that so now, because it's like I just have to focus on this one thing, which is to move his body and understand where I'm at.
Yeah. Mushi, what about for you?
Yeah, I guess this time in particular, to answer that first, hasn't been easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely new ways around making art for everyone, but also for most people being unable to make art, right? And at the same time, I would say it was strange because some of the practices that we started, not this practice in particular, but another project, but still conversations where we copied each other's posts from a distance when I had visa problems in the country and I was subject to being in Korea for a long duration of time, and we were trying to find methods of connecting and still working together at this sort of depth. And it was interesting to be subject to that same practice when we were doing that again, but like 20 blocks away from each other, you know, rather than actual seeds apart. But we took it as some type of motivation to try and share the work with others, because we saw that others were very much in the same boat, and to also try and pick up some pieces we left behind while making work, like book ideas and things like that.
Yeah. So, but the beginning of quarantine, you were both separated from each other.
Yes.
And then you kind of slowly came back to the practice.
Yeah.
Okay. How was the separation piece? I mean, I know you just mentioned that there's, you know, you communicated in a similar way as you did before, but what was that like in terms of just the uncertainty, right? Because your previous separation was more certain that, or like it would come, like things would come back together maybe on a specific timeline and you knew when it would end. But in this case, how did the uncertainty feel for you?
I felt like it was it's interesting because it was more difficult. So when something is sort of planned and you understand the parameters of it, it's a lot easier to kind of hold, because you kind of understand what you're going to do when that, and how you're going to shift that. So I think this is something that we're all experiencing, which is there is no ability to make a plan, and there's no understanding of when something is going to start or end. And so I feel like it was really pretty intense. I would say the first month of that type of separation was really intense, because also it was just 20 blocks. So it seems absurd. It seems impossible. Like, how can this be? At the same time, you know, so you go through, I feel like I went through enormous amount of sort of an emotional trail of like, what does this practice mean? What does it mean when I don't have this practice? What does collaboration mean? What does my individual identity mean? So there was a huge sort of amount of kind of deep inner looking, which I think is partially the gift of this time, is that we're all isolated, so we have a lot of reflective time. And then it's really reanalyzing what's important and why. And then how to keep engaging with people, keep engaging with each other during that time. So in the end, I call it a gift. During it, I was probably, you know, an emotional wreck.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were. Yeah.
It was hard. It was hard for sure, because I think when you mentioned, you know, us making work from separate continents is more circumstance-based. You know it. And I think in this case, a lot of artists are actually very planned and concrete about how they make work. You know, like we plan in or block in parts of the day for it to be unknown in how we explore something, but it's actually very planned, because if we don't block that time, for example, we can't have that unknown flowing of time to create. So then to be in such a container of unknown in all directions, of like, whoa, can we even talk to each other 6 feet apart, distance, no distance, supermarket, no supermarket, you know, it's just so many questions and so many not knowing when to be, like when it begins and ends, I think had a huge impact, because it was just a juggle.
Yeah. And how did it feel when you finally came together? Because it's so physical, right? There's so much vulnerability and there's so much physicality to the work that you do together. How did it feel to touch each other after months of not being able to because of quarantine?
That's interesting. So I'll answer that in 2 ways, because first of all, we have so many other practices. We did not go back to chair conversations until about 3 weeks after we had come back into contact with each other. So this is our one really physical kind of physical contact piece. So I think there was a lot of I would call circling each other to kind of re-engage and understand that we had also established our individual identities. And so there's a kind of carefulness with which you kind of reapproach. Like there's enormous relief in being able to be in the space together. But I think it took us time, and we ended up, the first time we went back to chair conversations, we took it out to just in the forts above the bridge. And you know, what you really discover is, like, Mushi always laughs about this because I always say, oh, I don't know you anymore. But this can happen on a daily basis because I really believe our lives are infinite and anything can happen in a given moment that can change the way we think or feel or see something. And so I have this sort of infinite sense of like things just could change instantly, and that I know people but can never really know them. So there's always this moment where I'm like, I don't know you anymore. Like I can't possibly know you anymore. But definitely when I first was moving his body around and he was moving my body around, up above the bridge, I was like, oh, I really know this person. I really do know this person. I really know this person inside out.
Thank God, right?
Yeah. Well, there's another like thing that I was really curious about. Candace and I were talking the other day, and she mentioned, Alex, that you're a twin.
Yes.
So I'm super, like, in terms of identity and in terms of the fluidity and the being with another partner in your practice, how have you found that, like, you've always been like you're manifested, with someone else in the same womb, right? That's how you came to be. How does that shape at all the practice and how you think about it in the context of everything else?
So it's a really good question because I think it has this is something that Mushi and I actually talk a lot about. My identity feels whole when it is with another person. So sharing an experience with somebody always gives me a fuller sense of the experience. And I think that has to do with the fact that I entered the world with somebody side by side. And then everything I understood and knew for the first few years, right? We're just being moved around everywhere together. My sense of, and she and I were very different, but we balanced each other. And so my sense of wholeness was really, really wrapped in that sense of being connected with somebody and moving through the world with somebody and looking at the world together and seeing how we saw it differently. Because she saw things really differently than I did, but we were really just like crawling on the same carpet. And what she perceived and what I perceived was dramatically different. So I struggle constantly between my individual identity as an artist and my collaborative identity as an artist. And probably more so than Mushi, because Mushi will answer this too, probably more so than Mushi, because I have constantly struggled to find myself as an individual, and yet I feel deeply moved to be moving through the world with somebody. And so like to work as an artist with another artist so tightly in a collaboration is a really powerful experience for me. It's really different. It's really different and really familiar, and it's something but I constantly struggle, like I'm like, where am I? Which is what I did with my twin. I'm not the twin, because that's how you get referred to as the twin, the twins, and you're like, but I have a name, other than twin. So that's where that really comes into play a lot in our collaboration, because sometimes I'm like, me, where am I? And then, oh my God, we got to share everything. We got to do everything together,
Yeah. So. It's an interesting, like confrontation of sorts, right? Because it's sort of like you could have just been you, right? In this, in sort of in your art practice, but then it's almost like the universe is leading you back to like being in a partnership in this other way. And Mushi, you're an only child, right? Or?
Yeah, I'm an only child. And I very much spent growing up alone. It was very I was alone in the house all the time. I'd come home and my mom would work, and like growing up in Korea, there's no you can't leave your kid alone at home. None of that existed. So I was home alone a lot. Probably like the age of 5 or 6, and my mom would leave a couple dollars on the table, and I'd get myself dinner, and then she'd be home at like 8 or 9. So in a way, opposite to that, some of my favorite experiences are alone. You know, that's when I almost also experience the greatest joy as well. But what I do take away from, so in a way, the collaboration is a challenge for me, not in the same way Alex perceives it, but maybe for me, like, oh, like, how do I actually do something together with someone? I never had to fight for my identity, you know? I never had to say this is mine. So then it's really interesting because I get to like play with that idea of first maybe approaching the collaboration as like, well, all these differences that we have are problems. I'm seeing everything in differences. Alex was saying all of these things in similarities, like, oh my God, we're so similar, you know? And I'd be like, what are you talking about, you know? But then was able to kind of turn over a leaf as at the beginning of our collaboration towards, oh, like this is all just really interesting research into how we can put all the perspectives and line them up and look at it and explore that together. So I think that's where we merge. That's the motivator, I think.
Yeah.
And being able to see each other's worlds and share them.
Has anything that was a pivotal moment, like when I was like, we're so similar, he just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I was like, what are you talking about? You know, and then when you see it, you're like, oh, that looks really different from your point of view. That I see where you see we seem different.
Yeah, and vice versa.
You know.
Yeah. Has anything in terms of identity, especially given this time right now, what we've been all experiencing globally, has the time shifted? Rather, has the experience of the racial dialogue that we've all been part of shifted your sense of identity in any way in the context of your work?
I think this is an ongoing question because I think this is like one thing I'm going to say is in art, like when we first started working together, there's this sense that we think we know what we're doing, and that it's only like 3 years later that we truly understand what we're doing. And so I think we're all inside this, like we're inside what is occurring. We're 6 months into this, and we probably don't fully understand how we've all changed. We've probably dramatically changed on a core level, but we won't be able to really reflect on that as a society for like 2 or 3 years. And so as an artist, there's that knowledge that that we are shifting, and there's a way in which we're trying to step inside ourselves and outside ourselves, so to understand where that shift is occurring. So in terms of identity, you know, I had to go back and really sit with myself and really explore a lot of those questions that you're asking. Like, why was collaboration so important to me? Should I go back to my individual practice, or how do I hold my individual practice and my collaborative practice? Because there was a lot of fear that came up, because it felt like the world could just, you know, out of its own whim, separate us. And yet all the work depended on us working together. And so there was this feeling like I wanted to gain control over my life again. And so I was really looking at, how do I gain control over my life again? Well, I can control myself and my work, but I can't control the world separating me and our work. And so when I went through that, it was like really just look at that really carefully. Like, what does identity mean? What is the gift of collaboration? So when I came back to it, I understood the gift of what an individual practice was and the gift of what a collaborative practice was. And that I was choosing this because it allowed for this really dynamic dialogue that is really special. So, and that I had to, I mean, we always quote that quote, the Meredith Monk quote, you know, that that ranges around that idea of the two minds coming together to create something that they can't create alone. And in a way, you have to let go of your ego, and you have to be able to know exactly who you are and be strong about who you are. And each individual needs to do that to come together. And so you have to be kind of fearless. Yeah. It requires more fearlessness.
No, definitely. I mean, I think the whole practice it's all about letting go, right? And that in and of itself is a fear of many.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mushi, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, maybe a small point with, I mean, like this racial injustice is it's very sore, you know, like it, and it, like it hurts. And, you know, I myself grew up, you know, as a mixed race person in a very homogenous country like Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where probably my perspectives around how I see differences comes from, or trying to assimilate, because I was constantly being told that, I was constantly being told I was who I wasn't, you know? I wasn't who I thought I was, you know? If me, child, 3-4-year-old thinks I'm Korean, you know, like, of course, in the end, I am half Russian, half Korean, but, you know, I'm in the context of Korea, and I just speak Korean, you know, this kid running around, and everyone's like, whoa, how do you speak Korean? You know, I don't even have a concept that there can be a different language, you know? And people are constantly telling me that I am not who I think I am, looking in the mirror. So it was many years of trying to assimilate, but also I think a very strong part of me is Korean. And then seeing the current times now sort of reminds me of all the struggles I went through and go through when we travel and move around these different places. But at the same time, I would say that, like, one of the main reasons why one of the main motivators for me to be in this collaboration was because I felt like almost my gender, ethnicity, race, and all of this was neutralized. I found someone to be able to look at these subjects that I'm interested in without all these barriers and judgments. And I felt my like conceptualizing ability honored, and to be able to do that together without, you know, like we never talk about like gender, race, and blah, blah. And that doesn't mean it's not in our work. I just feel so gifted that I can do these things without us talking about these things, because the focus is to just look at each other as humans. And I would say, you know, although I had the troubling experience growing up with that, with race, Alex is the one who helped me come out of it. Like, in a, wow, like this person really accepts me for who I am. Like, I never questioned that. And I've always questioned that with every single individual in my life, some type of judgment. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we both feel deeply seen.
Yeah.
That's a gift, because really, I think that's what each human being wants to be, is seen. And they want to, and that means like a real deep seeing, and a real like, it's like putting yourself inside somebody else's body and looking back through their eyes, and then experiencing the world through that lens. And that's, you know, close to impossible to do, but that's the work we need to do in order to see what each person is living. Because whatever is laid on our body, it's laid constantly. It starts from the beginning, and it's very difficult to know what else somebody else is experiencing. And yet that's the only way we're going to be able to make connection and bridge, is to really embody each person's experience as very real.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And it certainly looks like when you guys are performing, it looks like you're very, very, very connected. I'm going to turn it over to our Q&A, and I have some questions here that came through. Mindy's actually asking, what do you feel and think about while you're performing?
You can start.
Okay. So each time that we come to the performance, we don't actually know, and we each approach it slightly differently. So Mushi will tell you how he approaches it. But for me, I believe that it's through the moving of the body and moving my own body that a question will make itself known to me. So I actually literally approach the moment with almost as much of an empty slate as I can, and just kind of trying to understand where I am emotionally that day. And then it's through the movements that I start to understand which ones register and which ones. So it's like there's a sort of a moment where at first I'm just moving around, it may be almost randomly, but it's like I'm trying to find my way into myself. And then at a certain point, I understand the question. And then a question starts to sort of form. And each time it's different. There's just this moment where you realize what you're trying to express, but it's so nonverbal that it's much more understood in your body as, this is where I'm at today. This is what I'm feeling, thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think because I think there's sort of a pretext of trust, right? Of letting the other person manipulate your body. You know, they can let you fall. So I think what we often don't talk about is how we sort of built all of that over the years. Like, so there's already the knowledge that this person is not going to mishandle me when I'm going into it.
Yeah.
Or, you know, hopefully not. But
the occasional drop.
Yeah, the occasional drop, but you know.
It's a little bit bigger than me.
But other than that, I actually start from a very similar place. I think I ask myself like where I am today, like where am I? Via moving the body. So I think my process when I'm moving out of this body is usually I walk around her a couple times, asking myself these questions. And then I would say there's a huge element of surrender. I have to kind of let go of the intellect and almost try and speak this other language we have no idea what we're doing, you know? And once, it's very similar to meditation in a way, once you feel like you went off, you know, it's kind of when you're already back. But that's the place I think both of us are always trying to get to forget all of this. There's a point to which when I think both of us believe, okay, like we're doing it today, when everything disappears. Even when we're like in a bigger, like street organized performance, like Minnesota Street Projects or something, and there's an audience, there's a point to which everyone just disappears. And that's when I know I'm speaking this language, not the other language, which I think we're trying to explore.
Yeah, great. Does the chair feel like a womb sometimes for you when you're performing?
So I think it's different for each of us, but definitely, especially like if it's a chair like this, which has the two sides. So like we're always performing in different chairs. So the chairs themselves kind of dictate the way we can and can't move. But a chair like this is very womb-like, and I do like to try and like move him into like and tuck him into the space. So, you know, there's like all these different ideas of like, you know, what, you know, like maybe, you know, it's like all the different emotions, like maybe curling somebody up so that they feel protected, or opening them up so that they're sort of dominating the space. You know, there's a way in which our bodies move to either dominate a space or, you know, contract into a kind of safe womb-like. So there's something about this chair particularly that feels a little bit like a womb, you know what I mean? So maybe it depends on the chair.
Yeah, no, I'd say the same.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And Linda asks, we can see how touch is a sensation that's involved in the chair conversations. Does sound and smell play any role in the work?
That's a very good question. One thing that's really becomes very clear is actually I can hear Mushi's heartbeat. So that actually creates a type of rhythm at some point. When at first I don't hear it, but at some point there's a way in which maybe I'm moving past it and I'll suddenly hear the rhythm of it. And that's actually quite powerful. So one of the things I've realized in this practice is that a person's heartbeat is a very powerful rhythmic element to, I mean, obviously normally you can't, when you're speaking to somebody, you can't hear their heartbeat. But if you're moving somebody, your ear just grazes that area, even if it's grazing from the back, you'll suddenly hear the heartbeat, and we're moving in a quiet enough space that you really feel that. And that sound is probably one of the most profound sounds that I've experienced during these performances.
Yeah, I would say for me at the beginning, the sound and what was the other one? Smell. It's definitely there at the beginning, but almost I would answer in a similar way to the previous question of how everything disappears for me. and I just become very heightened to maybe the smell and the sound that exists in around the chair.
Mhm.
And I just become focused on that. And then the other sounds, even when we're doing it on the streets and like it's in the middle of New York and cars are everywhere,
Yeah.
at some point it just all becomes monotone. And I just try and hear this. Yeah.
Yeah, if he washes his hair, then it smells good.
And so there's one other question that I wanted to mention, and it ties Mushi a little bit to what you mentioned about gender and sort of the understanding of, or even like that there doesn't need to be a conversation around gender, and it's sort of a fluid thing. Is that in your performances? It seems like it's almost like an erased concept. Is that intentionally done, or is it just part of something that evolved organically?
Say again.
So it seems that the gender gap erases through your performance. Is that intentional?
Oh, erases.
Erases, yes, yeah.
So I think what actually kind of, it's not necessarily intentional, because maybe I'm highly aware of the fact that he's male. But at the same time, sometimes I think his limbs are mine. So there's a way in which I've been moving his body around so much that sometimes I think I'm moving my body around. There's a moment in which I've kind of entered his context. And so there's a feeling of, I mean, it probably goes back to that place that Mushi's saying. At some point, you let go of all of it. Maybe at the beginning, you're not, at the first few seconds, you are aware of that, but it erases itself over time too, each time. You know, there's that sense of, like the line between one body and another body becomes sort of obscured. And this is really hard to explain. Like it would maybe be something that you might experience if you just kept doing this with somebody and moved their body around. There's definitely a language evolving, and it's like words. So there's this way in which you're just attending to that language, and so certainly there's moments like if I drop him, it's because I forgot he's bigger than me. And I think I'm whipping him around, and and then all of a sudden, I'm presented with enormous weight, and it's extended off the chair. It's no longer supported by the chair, and now it's actually too much for me to hold. And those moments will come as a surprise for me, because I'll be like, "Whoa, I forgot he was bigger than me."
Yeah, the hair over our face is definitely to erase the visual identity that the face presents.
Yeah. So to wrap us up, I'm just curious, like what's coming up for you guys in terms of next projects, things you're excited about in the next few months?
Tomorrow, actually, while we're at the residency at 18th Street Arts, we started a new project, and it's hard to describe because it's so new, but it's around words. And we have a word project already called Dictionary that I think Alex might have explained before, where both of us define the same word. This context of defining in a sentence as objectively as possible, and then writing a story around it individually to really understand what is in it for each person.
Yeah, how the word has been laid on each of our bodies over time, and how a single word can carry so much.
Yeah, and this new project, listing words or word list, I don't know what the name is, but what we're working on is one of us will begin and write a word on a piece of paper, and the other person will respond to that word and write the next word. And we'll go back and forth like this until the end of the paper. And when we both reach the end of the paper, both of us will eliminate one word of our own from that list, circle one of our own from that list, and then check mark one of each other's.
Yeah.
We're gonna try and do that like sort of live tomorrow evening. For anyone who's still here, please join us tomorrow as well. But right now we're sort of sharing work in this way, like trying to engage with everyone, and then going back to LA on Friday.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys so much. I think we're at time. So good to talk to you again.
Yeah, really
Thank
good.
you.
And thank you for such good questions.
Yeah.
It always pushes us.
Yeah, we love the questions. It's a reminder, like things like this is a reminder for us to the reason why like we like to share our work. Because in the end, it's very expensive for us. Think about those questions. Even, I mean, this is almost funny, but like even hearing each other's answers is very fun for us each time someone else asks us a question. So thank you.
Yeah, you know, and I just want to say also, I mean, that goes back to the very beginning of this, which is sharing is a really key component to art. I used to make art and I just think I would just keep it, you know, like to myself. But I realized at some point that the sharing is the dialogue. The dialogue is a huge part of artwork. And I think that's what the museums, the galleries, we're all experiencing is like, it's such a core component to, it's the way artists speak. It's that they're wanting to have a conversation about something that they see and how they see. They present it in a visual manner, but then it's meant to create dialogue. And so that's a really core component. So when we have this chance, it's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Villa SF.
Yeah, thank you, Candace and Villa SF and Riddle and and we have no CSF here. So thank you to everybody. Turn it off.